Luke 1 and 2 have the Christmas story as we know it. And I estimated I have brought about 350 Christmas messages in my ministry. Probably 300 of those are from Matthew 1 and 2 and Luke 1 and 2. And it was just anything else to say. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to do. And so I was a little frustrated about it all. And it was somewhat boring after a while. I said, isn't it boring? And we do the same thing. And we've got we'll come tonight and we're going to sing Silent Night and we're going to light the candles and we're going to have our service. It's the same thing. Christmas Eve is the same thing. And I was thankful this Advent season we were taking a little different focus and following the hope and peace and joy and love that we've talked about, bringing us to this point now. So I had different topics. I had new topics. I was in Philippians. So that was a little refreshing. And then yesterday morning, I came out here about 9 o'clock, and I said, okay, Lord, what is it? Matthew 1 and 2, Luke 1 and 2. I've preached probably 300 of those 350 are from Matthew and Luke. And what else is there to say? Is there anything new? I've covered it about all. And that went on for about 2 hours. And I'm just confessing. See, I know you're not supposed to think like that. I'm just confessing. You ever have to do that? And I'm setting an example. But 11 o'clock, I just kind of felt the Lord shooting things, off the walls in my mind. And I learned something yesterday morning that in 350 sermons, I hadn't learned yet. And it was just about the time I determined there was nothing left to say, and I was giving this spiel to the Lord, and I just wanted whatever He wanted said. That's what I wanted to say. But, everything seems to keep pointing to the same thing. And what I began to piece together that He was saying is that circumstances in our lives, happen day in, day out, year in, year out, throughout our lives, but Christmas happens in the ordinary circumstances of everyday life. And the ordinary, routine, humdrum of our everyday life is where Christmas happened. And then He said, go back and read that again. Go back, and I went back to Luke 1 and 2. And I was reminded that there are government leaders issuing decrees and taxing people. That's the same as it is now. It's been that way all along. You'll find a couple unmarried and expecting a baby. You find no vacancy signs in your life, right? Laborers that work the night shift. And this just began piecing together, and I said, Lord, I'm getting it. Those are real life circumstances, and real life is always the world Christmas happens in. It was then and it is today. Now, for some, Christmas is a hard time of the year. We just have to stop and think that. We got all this glitter and tinsel and all that going around, but there are people that are having a hard time. Saw the news the night before that a police officer was shot and killed trying to stop a robbery 2 days before Christmas with 2 kids. It's a difficult and painful time for some people. There are layoffs. A loved one passes away. Somebody has a terrible accident. A life-changing illness has set in. For others, it's the best time of the year. It's joyful, it's exciting. Maybe you got the big Christmas bonus, or there was a wedding in the family, or a new baby was born. But I think for most of us, it varies between those year in and year out. How has your life changed since last Christmas? Has it been a difficult and painful year? How's your life changed? Has it been a year of joy and thanksgiving? Was it a memorable year or a year you just as soon forget? Maybe a mixture. Whatever the last year has been and whatever changes it's brought to your life, for better or worse, your last year has been deeply rooted in the Christmas story. That's what God was telling me. And I'm not talking about the then and there Christmas story. I'm not talking about in those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree. I'm not talking about that Christmas story. I'm talking about the here and now Christmas story, because this is where Christmas happens. The one that's taking place in these days, in this place where we live. I did have some questions kind of start drifting through my mind. What good is it, if you think about it, what good is it if Jesus laid in a manger in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago if he's not cradled in the manger of our hearts? What difference does that make? What good is it to us if the angel announced good news of great joy to the shepherds living in the field if the good news is not also announced in the dark place of our lives? That's where Christmas occurs. It's where it occurred here. It's where it occurs now. What good is it to us if the shepherds want to see something take place and hurry off to see what happened if we don't also see in our lives this thing that has happened, that God has done in the world? And what good to us is it if Mary ponders and treasures those things in her heart if we don't also wonder at the mystery of God in our time and place? As familiar as this is, it's revelatory. It's a revelation to us and could be. So every year we come to this place to hear the Christmas story, don't we? The story never changes. I was complaining about that to God. God said, it needs to be that way. It's the same story with the same characters, the same locations, the same plot, and the same ending. I'm not going to change anything for you. Mary and Joseph are pregnant and unmarried. Emperor Augustus has issued a decree of taxation. Mary and Joseph go to Bethlehem. There's no room at the inn. Mary gives birth to Jesus, puts him in a manger. The angel announces good news to the shepherd. They come and see this thing has happened. Mary treasures and ponders the words of the shepherd in her heart. We count on that. We're glad it's the same. We're glad it doesn't change. It's never changing. It's never going to change. That just kind of liberated me from my whining and complaining. I think that's the reason we come here tonight, because we all come from life out there. Life just has a way of rushing into the dark places, into the discouraging places, into the hopeless places, into the what am I going to do now places. And we need to know that despite our changing story of our life from month to month and year to year, Christmas is still true, and it doesn't change. Despite what's happened to me, or despite what's happening to me now, I want to know that Christmas is not going to change. The story is not going to change. It's still a relevant story. And I want to be reminded that light is still shining in dark places, don't you? I want to know the good news is still being announced, and it doesn't change. And that child is still being born anew in people's lives, and God is still with us, and it never changes. That's what God ended up causing me to think, or however, he didn't appear, and I didn't hear an audible voice, but you know how God speaks to our hearts through his word. And aren't we excited? It's true. All of it, and it doesn't change. Christmas is happening in whatever circumstance is going on in your life and my life. Christmas is happening. It's happening in whatever changes you've experienced over this past year, and it's going to happen throughout the next year in whatever occurs in your life. Christmas is a real and present entity in the difficult and painful times of life. It's real. What do I do now? Christmas story. It hasn't changed. It still brings hope. It still brings help. It still brings redemption. It still brings blessing. It's the same. And it hasn't changed, and we're not changing it. Christmas is more than just the facts on paper. That's the starting point. Because every year the verses of Christmas are written new in the circumstances of our life. We read about the circumstances of Joseph and Mary and the angels and the shepherds and so on and so forth. But they happen in the circumstances of our life. Every year. The reality of Christmas. God with us. Emmanuel. Still happening. That's never in question. So let's take a minute and tell ourselves the story of Christmas once again, but this time listen to the reality of the story. Have you ever loved someone so deeply that all you wanted to do was pour yourself into the life of that person like Joseph did Mary? She was in a hard situation. People weren't buying that virgin birth story, just about as you and I wouldn't buy it. He was going to protect her. He was going to care for her. He loved her. He didn't quite understand. He was going to put her away, but quietly and in a way that wouldn't hurt her. And the angel said, no, it's okay, take her. And he did, and he went, and he everything he gave, he was taking care of someone else. Is somebody taking care of you like that? Have you had a Joseph in your life? Who are the Josephs in your life that have accompanied you this year, that have protected you this year, that have cared for you this year? Who in your life has got your back? Who has got you covered? Who is the enemy going to have to go through before he can even get to you? You got Joseph in your life? That's the Christmas story. Have you ever looked into the face of a newborn child and just marveled at the miracle of life? I remember when our first daughter, Holly, was born, and I wasn't a believer or anything at all like that, but I remember when they told us that the babies were in the nursery there, we could go to the glass and look in. This was before, Dad had all hands-on kinds of stuff. It was kind of a gross thing for me anyway. So just wait, and we'll put them in, and you can look through the glass. And there was another dad there, don't know him, don't know who he is, don't know anything at all about it. He was standing there looking, I was standing there looking, and we were just looking, and nobody was saying anything. It was still, it was quiet. And all of a sudden, I heard this guy say, life really is a miracle, isn't it? I'll never forget that. Life is still, I don't know who it was. I never talked to him beyond that time. I just heard him say that. But have you ever had the marvel of considering the miracle of life? Life that inspired you to be a better person? I had a lot of aspirations raising our kids that I'd be what they needed me to be, what they hoped I would be, what they even wanted me to be. I don't know I ever reached that bar. But it's got a way of challenging you that way. You have somebody in your life. Have you ever had someone show up in your life and say or do exactly what you needed at that time? They announced some good news, some hope, some encouragement when you needed it most. Have you experienced somebody like that? That's the Christmas story. Did you have a time when hope and strength and courage was kind of born anew in you? That you kind of had a surge, a lift, you got picked up? That's the Christmas story. Did you ever experience peace and contentment in circumstances that were neither peaceful nor what you wanted, but you found peace and contentment in that place, even though all around you was chaos? That's the Christmas story. What are you cradling tonight and cherishing in your heart that you know beyond a shadow of a doubt is a gift from God. What is that? You have it, you're certain, you're confident, you cherish it, and say, this is a gift that God has given me. That's the Christmas story. The Christmas story is 2,000 years old. But friends, the reality of the Christmas story is brand new because it never changes. So I'm not complaining anymore. Maybe look forward to next Advent and preach my heart out in Matthew 1 and 2 and Luke 1 and 2. Because the reality is still real. I hope that's your experience tonight as well. Father, thank you for these minutes in your word. Help us as we approach the table, even as we've been reflecting on our life on this past year, even if we've been contemplating the changes that took place or perhaps the changes that didn't take place that we were hoping would. Maybe I'm not as far down the road as I wanted to be. But Father, the reality of Christmas is alive as much today in our hearts and lives as it was 2,000 years ago in those of Mary and Joseph, shepherds, wise men, and all the rest. Father, may that be our experience, that we might be filled with joy. We might be filled with the miracle of Christmas and just ponder in our hearts, contemplate, reflect on those people you've put in our life, the helpers that you have brought along our path that have enabled me to be where I am today. All a part of the Christmas story. We're going to